theme of the month for May is, what does it mean to live a life of imagination? Have you become more or less imaginative with age? Are you more imaginative than you think? Has imagination ever led you astray, into danger?
And I want to begin doing that with a story about the French fry in Sally's laundry room. Now, this isn't a story of my own. It's actually a story that was shared with me by our director of member services up at our sister church at First Unitarian. The director's name is Aaron Julian. And Aaron has a friend named Sally who she house sits for from time to time when Sally goes away. Aaron explains that Sally is a widower, and about a year and a half ago her husband died, and this is a husband who she adored. She had a long life with, and long marriage, beautiful marriage between the two of them, but with a year and a half between now and the death, Aaron said that Sally was now starting to date, and this new fella's name was Bill. Aaron says she knows and likes Bill. He's a good guy, so-called maybe French fry, so to speak, that anyone would be glad to stumble upon. And so Aaron said, as she explained this story to me, she said she was pleased when she went over to Sally's house to pick up the keys for when Sally would be away, and she discovered that Sally had already given that extra set of keys to Bill. Now, this is where things got a little tricky. The absent keys weren't the tricky part. Sally just gave Aaron her regular set of keys, and Aaron promised to take care of them and just give them back when she came. No, the tricky part, Aaron said, was when she smiled, this sly smile of Aaron's. And I know you don't know Aaron, but you know, think maybe Heidi or Carrie Graff or maybe even Dee, and think about their sly smiles. And with that sly smile, Aaron looked at Sally and said, "Hey." Bill's got his own set of keys, huh? That's pretty great. To which Aaron said, Sally replied, "Oh, I'm not sure why he really needs them. I mean, he's a nice guy, but..." And then she shrugged her shoulders. Aaron said her heart broke. And it wasn't hard to guess, right? As I'm sure is the same for all of us. It wasn't hard to guess what that shoulder shrug meant, but Aaron says that shoulder shrug was confirmed a few days later when Aaron was house sitting and she went down to do some laundry in Sally's laundry room. And as she sat there in front of the laundry machine, she noticed right away, just to the right, a picture of Sally's husband, first husband, Stephen, sitting right there on the wall. A perfect spot, Aaron said, she thought. A perfect spot, right? Because Bill did not do his laundry at Sally's house yet. And from the side of that picture, it looked like he might never be doing his laundry at her house. And so there we have it, right? It's a simple story this morning, but you know, friends, also I think such an important one as we move again from last month's theme of yearning into this month's theme of imagination, because it's a story, right? It's a story, I think, that draws out the connection between these two important themes of yearning and imagination. And I love how my friend helped me frame that connection and help me see that connection more clearly. You see, in talking about this, both of us, we decided, right, that Sally's story is really a story about storytelling. It's really a story about storytelling, because Bill was certainly competing with Stephen, but he was also competing with the story. the story of Stephen, the story, right, that Sally had built up in her imagination about what that relationship was. I remember Erin telling me that she knew Stephen, and Stephen was a great guy, but she noticed that since his death over that past year and a half, as she listened to Sally, somehow he'd become an even greater guy, month by month. No way, right? No way Bill could compete with that story. Which I'm thinking brings all of us, right? As I've wrestled with this, I'm thinking that with that brings all of us into the story as well. Because, there is this way, friends, this crazy way in which each and every one of us, right, not just Sally, use our imaginations to build up stories about our past yearnings, our past French fries, so to speak, in a way that diminishes, sometimes severely, right? Sometimes severely diminishes our ability to yearn for and embrace just the simple present, the gifts and French fries that are just right here. And these imaginative stories of ours, I think, as I've been wrestling with this, don't all come in the form of Sally's. Again, sometimes I think rather than being stories that we make others, right, try to live up to like Sally did with Bill, there are also stories at times that are given to us, right, given to us by others that we convince ourselves we must live up to. For instance, I've been thinking this week about a story shared by one of my favorite writers, Parker Palmer. He's a Quaker writer and thinker. He's, again, one of my favorites. And early on in his career, he tells a story about how early on in his career he landed what was this perfect job for him, a teacher and a director at a Quaker spiritual retreat center. And this job also was small enough to allow him to pursue his other passion of writing. He says he was happy as a clam. But then in the midst of all that, he was offered a position to be president of a small liberal arts college. It was quite an honor, and not just an honor, he said, but one that his family, and he stresses, especially his father, had always told him was his true calling, a job that fit his true potential. He said his family was a family of professors, and so, my God, right, the president of a college, that's the pinnacle of what someone can be. I mean, a retreat center teacher, that's nice and all, but right, he said. Parker is a Quaker, as I said, and so as is the practice with Quakers, when making such a huge decision like this, he called together what's known as a clearness committee, which is basically a group of 3 to 5 people, trusted friends that you pull together, not so much to give you advice, but to ask questions, pointed questions that help ensure that you are making this big decision from your deepest self and from your truest voice, or in Quaker language, from your inner light. And Parker goes on to tell the events of what happened inside this clearness committee. He says at one point in the discussion, one of the gentlemen in the circle said, Parker, what would you love most about being president? Parker then responded by saying this. He said, well, I'd miss my writing. I'm not sure I'd be thrilled about all the long hours, and oh God, I would hate all the fundraising. There was this pause, and everybody in the group let the pause sit there for a while, hoping Parker would hear himself, but he didn't. And so in good, gentle, Quakerly fashion, one of the other people in the group said, Parker, I'm not sure you noticed, but we just asked you what you would love about being president, right? And then Parker said he thought again, and then in all seriousness, he said, well, I would love the idea of seeing my picture in the paper with the word president underneath it. Again, a Quakerly pause. To which one of the members of the group replied, this time in a little less Quaker-like fashion, with a little sarcasm, and said, Parker, I'm just wondering, but have you ever thought that there might be an easier way for you to get your picture in the paper? And just like all of us, right? Parker says he laughed. He laughed in that moment. But he also said that he felt like he was hit by a ton of bricks. Here I was, he said. A man who regularly talks about following your own inner voice, but who almost allowed himself to be led by the imaginings of my father. And with that, the story ends with Parker turning down the president's job, yay, and sticking with his true calling in the retreat center and remaining a teacher and a writer. And the whole story, as Parker Palmer tells it, is all then neatly tied up as a narrow escape. But here's the thing. As I read that again, here's the thing. As I read that and thought about this week, I found myself thinking and wondering if that story is maybe just a little bit too neatly tied up. Now, I know this is a little unfair to Parker and even probably presumptuous of me, but every time that I have come across this story and every time that I've shared it or used it in one of our gatherings, I have found myself a little bit defensive, even more than a little bit defensive of Parker's poor dad. Scapegoat completely, right? He was completely scapegoat, as if his story, his imaginings were the only problem, the only thing that was messy in this story. And not have I only found myself a little defensive of Parker's dad, but also, frankly, a little disappointed, right, in Parker and that clearness committee. And it all has to do with that comment about there being a better way for him to get his picture in the paper. You see, I find myself, every time that I've come across that phrase, I find myself just wanting to sort of jump, right? Jump into the story and assert myself on that clearness committee. I don't think that's very Quaker to do, but I really wanted to insert myself on that committee and just say, hey, wait a minute, just time out, right? Wait 1 minute. Isn't there just a little leftover business here? I mean, freeing yourself from your dad's story, right, is great and all, but what about freeing yourself from the story of needing to have your picture in the paper? I mean, why isn't the story of teaching and writing, why isn't that little French fry enough? And so with that, friends, I come this morning just to what I think I most just want to say today. What is wrong with the French fry all by itself? Why does it need to have a picture in the paper come with it? And of course, in asking this morning and lifting it up, I'm exposing a disappointment, right? Not just with Parker Palmer and that clearness committee, but also with myself. Because again, we're talking this morning about the simple, right? The simple, but so pervasive human tendency we all have to let our imaginations, right? Our imaginations, our stories about the past and the future, smallness and bigness, perfection and disappointment, what's beneath us and what's worthy of us, we allow all that imaginative stuff just to so often diminish our present. To diminish, in a sense, what we frankly already got. And if there's anything, that Sally's story or Parker Palmer's story have reminded me of, it's just this simple but so important wisdom and gift of being able to simply want and yearn for what we already have. And I know, believe me, I know that all this talk of French fries this morning can seem a little bit silly, right? But I gotta tell you, right, ever since I got that love letter from Stephanie, I have not wanted to let it out of my sight. And it's precisely the seemingly littleness of it, the French fry talk, so to speak, that's felt so profound to me. It's confronted me with the truth, that most, right? Most, the biggest amount, that most of the stories that come from my imagination and shape my yearnings are indeed precisely those about growing beyond being that little bird and accumulating in my life so much more than just silly little French fries. And it's also, as I've wrestled with this, confronted me with just how much time, right? How much time I waste on these imaginative stories about past and future, smallness and bigness, and how much of my life is lived in those stories rather than in the story just simply right here. Well, I certainly don't want at all, this morning to come off as a rant against aspiration, high expectations, or pushing ourselves to be all that we can be. I do this morning, friends, simply think that just a little, right, just a little bit of balance is in order. Indeed, this past month, you all could not have been more clear how desperately, I think we all, every single one of us, yearn for this balance, and how desperately we need and want each other to help us keep that balance. I think of the feedback I got from so many of the facilitators of our small groups, the facilitators of our Soul Matter circles, both down here and also up at our sister church in Rochester. When I asked the facilitators just a couple of weeks in getting ready for this sermon, when I asked the facilitators for feedback about how their groups on yearning had gone over the last month, most of them, get this, most of them reported that their members rebelled against me. Poor little me. Rebelled against me, and more specifically rebelled against my original emphasis in all of our Soul Matters packets that I had put there on following our bliss and dreaming bigger and about more. One facilitator put the rebellion this way in an email to me. He said, Scott, in our group, one of our members, right when she sat down in the circle, one of our members went through the packet of material you created and started to read aloud and count how many times you use the word more. She stopped when she got to 17. And then she put the packet down, he says, and she said, I am so sick of more. I know Scott didn't mean it. Now, I'm not convinced the woman actually said that. I think this person was just trying to soften it up for me. But she said, I know Scott didn't mean it, but doesn't he know that more is not only exhausting, but makes one go blind? Now, friends, to that I got no defense. Feel a little defensive, but no defense. And mostly I just to that this morning want to say amen. Because I think my friend, my constructively critical friend, cuts straight at the heart at what's at stake in imaginatively building up our past or yearning for bigness. It's this blindness. And in this regard, I find myself thinking about a passage from a beautiful book, actually one of my favorite books ever, called Pilgrim at Tinker Creek by a woman named Annie Dillard. The passage I want to lift up this morning comes from a chapter entitled Seeing. It's a little longer, so I'd ask us just to take a breath so we can sink into it. This is what she says. She says, it is spring, and I've been thinking about seeing. There are lots of things to see, unwrapped gifts and free surprises. The world is fairly studded and strewn with pennies cast broadside from a generous hand. But, and this is the point, who gets excited about a mere penny? If you follow one arrow, if you crouch motionless on the bank to watch a ripple thrill on the water and are rewarded by the sight of a muskrat kid paddling from its den, will you count that sight as a chip of copper only and go ruefully on your way? It is dire poverty indeed, she goes on, When one is so malnourished and fatigued that she won't stoop to pick up a penny. But if you cultivate a healthy poverty and simplicity, a healthy poverty and simplicity, so that finding a penny will literally make your day, then since the world is in fact planted with pennies, you have with your poverty but a lifetime of days. It is that simple. What you see is what you get. Amen. Amen. And now, friends, as I say amen, there's so much, right, that I want to say amen to, and so much in this that I absolutely love. But today, I hope the piece of that passage, the piece that I hope pops out to you most is that line about cultivating a healthy poverty and simplicity. Because in it, I think, lies the exact spiritual challenge to which every single one of us is called. With it, right, Annie Dillard is, of course, not just encouraging us to simplify our lives, but I think to simplify the stories we bring to our lives. To, in a sense, right, put those stories aside so that we can see what's right in front of us with all of that, without all of that imaginative baggage. Which leads me to the last story that I want to share today. It's actually a story from one of our own. It's a story from Petra, one of the young women who's a member of our community. She couldn't be here today, but she said, she was generous enough to say that I could share this story with all of us today. And she actually said she was very grateful for that because, in Petra's style, she said it would make her feel like she was here, even though she wasn't. And this is a story that she shared in one of the Soul Matters groups we had this month. I think as many of you know, about 2 winters ago, not everyone knows, but most of us do, that 2 winters ago, Petra was in I don't know what else you'd call it, a treacherous, 5-car pile-up car wreck that certainly is one that few people thought she could have survived. And she shared that story, the story of that car wreck, with all of us about a couple weeks ago, again in the small group that I run. And she was responding, when she told us that story, she was responding to the question in our packet on yearning, this one that asked, what if you started every day saying yes to the yearning of your heart? And so Petra then started to talk, and all of us just sort of sat there riveted as we listened. She talked about passing, passing this semi on the road and it not seeing her. She talked about, right, in that 4-lane highway as they were passing, how it turned and just clipped the back of her car and sent her spinning to face the grill. She talked about how then that sent her spinning even more and more into all the cars coming at her at super high speeds, and she T-boned numerous of them and spun and hit the wall again. And she went on to talk about being convinced, in that terrible moment of spinning, sitting there right in the car with her sister, being absolutely convinced that neither of them were going to survive and make it out alive. But mostly, as we sat in this story and listened to her, mostly she talked about the moment when it all ended and every single person involved in that wreck unbelievably had survived. And then as we all sat there dumbstruck, she talked about how right in that moment when everything was quiet, she reached out as quick as she could to grab her sister's hand and as loudly and as many times as she could shout, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. As I talked to her again this week about that event, she referred to that as miracle number 1, just simply surviving. But she also said there was a miracle number 2, and this is what she also shared in our group. She said miracle number 2, she said, was not just surviving. Miracle number 2 was how she felt right in that moment. Well, not just felt right, because she said along with this feeling came this almost audible voice she says, inside her head rang the words, "I am a guest." In her head, that's what she heard and saw. I am a guest. And she didn't describe it, she said, as the voice of God, but rather she said simply as this sense of deep knowing, this sense of seeing and knowing herself, as she put it so wonderfully, of seeing herself as a surprised guest to life. So that is my yearning, she said, with this huge smile on her face. I mean, the rest of us in the group were holding back tears and trying not to be blubbering idiots. But she was smiling, right? She said, so that is my yearning to every day keep hold of and remain in this experience of being a surprised guest to life. Because she said, once one has, because she said, one has a whole different attitude toward life and others when one realizes that we've been given the gift of being a guest. Since the accident, she said, I am still so surprised how everything and everyone around me is enough. Since the accident, I am still so surprised how everything and everyone around me is enough. Immediately I wrote that down because I knew there was a sermon in there. But I also, friends, I also wrote it down because, my God, I so wanted to hold on to it too. As a guest to life, I'm surprised how everything and everyone around me is enough. And friends, simply, more than anything today, this is the story I hope all of us can get our imaginations to write about ourselves, about others, and even life itself, without us having to go through the car wreck, of course. It is, I believe, the healthy poverty to which Annie Dillard refers, with everything and everyone we encounter being judged, not better or worse, not disappointing or irreplaceable, not laundry room worthy or newspaper picture deserving. Just enough. Wonderfully and miraculously enough. May that be so. Amen.
Today, while the blossoms still cling to the vine, I'll taste your strawberries, I'll drink your sweet wine. A million tomorrows shall all pass away ere I forget all the joy that is mine today. I sing. I'll feast at your table, I'll sleep in your clover. Who cares what tomorrow may bring? Today, while the blossoms still cling to the vine, I'll taste your strawberries, I'll drink your sweet wine. A million tomorrows shall all pass away ere I forget all the joy that is mine today. days I can't live on promises, winter to spring. Today is my moment, and now is my story. I'll laugh and I'll cry and I'll sing. Today, while the blossoms still cling to the vine, I'll taste your strawberries, I'll drink your sweet wine. A million tomorrows shall all pass away ere I forget all the joy that is mine today.
Join us for worship every Sunday at 10 a.m. at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Canandaigua, a welcoming congregation. We are located at 3024 Cooley Road, 4 miles west of South Main Street, Canandaigua, just north of the intersection with Routes 5 and 20. Look for the blue signs just before the turn. Your comments about this program or questions about the church are welcome at 585-396-1370 or at our website, www.canandaiguauu.org. Producer and editor, Daniel Brigham.